it so important to be using the correct terminology?
Incredible question. There are so many reasons why we want to make sure that across the board, everyone is using the same, not only the same terminology, but understanding what that truly means. And some of the reasoning could be for clearer communication with internal staff or your marketing agency, or for efficient collaboration, making sure everybody across the board is on the same page. But ultimately, the purpose of this is to lead to a better marketing outcome and ideally business growth if you're using the right terminology to describe the exact purpose and exact situation that you're in to move you forward in order to optimize.
That's absolutely right. And there are so many different terms and so much jargon that is specific to media. So we're going to go through a bunch of definitions to make sure everyone's on the same page. And if you have any questions as we're going through this, or if there's another term that you're wondering about, feel free to pop it in the questions and Emma will let us know and we'll make sure to touch on it. But the first one, starting really at the most basic, is impressions. And this is the number of times that your ad was shown. So the number of times that it was seen. This doesn't necessarily equate to, total users, but how many times it was seen.
And that really is mainly one of the most difficult parts of an impression to grasp is the fact that it's not just who has seen your ad, but it's how many times your ad was actually served. Your ad can be served on a page multiple times, depending on what type of approach you're doing, what type of ad platform you're serving on, the ad type you're serving with. So understanding that impressions might not exactly mean how many people saw your ad, but more focused on how many times your ad was actually served within whatever that ad space was. And the next stage of the funnel that it's really critical to understand not only the purpose of this, but the formula is click-through rates. So understanding what your impressions are, how many times your ad was served, versus how many times a user, whether it's a customer or a potential customer, actually interacted with that ad and clicked on it. So the ratio of impressions to clicks is how we're going to get our click-through rate. So the actual formula is clicks divided by impressions times 100. That times 100 is actually really critical within this formula, or else you're just going to get a really kind of boring looking decimal. Once you multiply it by 100, you're going to get into the percentages to really understand what was that ratio of when my ad was served versus the interest that customers may have had with that ad.
And so these are really your frontline metrics. So before someone has those interactions and interacting with the ad, and then what happens once they get to your website, to your landing page. So those we would have your conversions. And so the conversions is the most desired action on that page that you want people to take that is measurable. So typically, this is the lowest part in the funnel where you can measure someone. So in an ideal situation, it might be, someone, makes it all the way through an application. If you can track that far, that's fantastic. A lot of the times you can't. And so it may be someone just clicking on that button that's showing intent to start.
And there's so many different types of intent to start or bottom of the funnel activity that we can track. As an FI, it's a lot more difficult to focus on that final destination aspect of the conversion funnel or of the sales funnel because of all of the different applications needed in order to open an account or apply for a loan. There's a lot more steps than what a e-commerce website might have, where you see a product, you add it to the cart, you buy it. Perfect, super, and simple. Where for FIs, your conversion actions might be an apply now on your landing page. That's as far as marketing can bring people into that sales funnel. But maybe you don't have an application provider. So you could do a form fill instead if you have fillable forms on your page. That form submit button, that's moving them as close to the funnel as you can get them to lead them to the sales direction. It could also be maybe you don't have any of these options. You don't have an application provider, you don't have a form. Maybe it's setting up an appointment or calling to learn more. There's many different stages that a conversion could be at. Granted, we would love if everything was apply now or the end of the submission button in an application. That's a beautiful situation. For the most part, it's just going to be that critical action on your landing page. That should be your conversion. And before we move to the next one, I just want to make a minor note. Conversions are different from a campaign and ad perspective versus what Google Analytics considers a conversion.
Yep.
That's now called a key event. That's a completely different conversation. However, I just wanted to make sure that that is noted. A campaign conversion versus a website GA4 conversion, separate entities.
Yeah, that's a great call out. The next thing that we want to talk about is cost per click, or CPC, depending on what platform you're looking at. Sometimes they just use the abbreviation. And so this is how much you paid for each click that happened during your campaign. The math for this, it is your cost per click equals your total campaign spend divided by the number of total clicks that you received. So nothing too crazy there in terms of math. You know, if you have a campaign that spent $500 and you get 1,000 clicks, then your cost per click is 50 cents. So or $500 divided by 1,000, that's how you get that. The one really important thing to call out here is that this is a metric associated with your campaign. It is a performance metric versus a payment type, which Abby will get into.
Yes, so an additional payment type that this is a term that gets used in many scenarios where it maybe shouldn't be used, and that is pay per click, or PPC. So pay per click, PPC, is a digital advertising model where advertisers pay a fee each time your ad is clicked. So this is a very specific payment model. You don't have your set spend and say, run it. You say, this is what I want to be able to bid per click or pay per click. And this is mainly seen only with search or text related ads. Basically, every other ad type for display, programmatic, social, you are not billing on a pay per click scenario. You're oftentimes billing in the next category that we're going to dive into. But the most critical thing to know here is pay per click and cost per click are not the same thing by any means. Exactly like Kaylin said, the cost per click, or CPC, is a metric. So is your campaign performing cost efficiently versus how are you paying for the campaign? So it's really important that we're not cross-pollinating those terms and that they stay as their own individual entities.
Yeah, absolutely. And pay per click, if you were buying from, a third party and that's what the payment model was going to be, you would be able to say, okay, for $500, I want to, I will get so many clicks. And you would be able to know what volume of clicks you should expect for your campaign, where cost per click is, again, just based off of how a campaign performed. So on the opposite side of that, we have cost per thousand, or CPM. You wouldn't think it would be CPM. You would think it would be CPT, T for thousand. M, it's milli, which is Latin for 1,000. So nice and complicated, but that is pay per thousand, which is per thousand impressions that you receive. So say it's a $6 CPM. If you get 3,000 impressions, you're spending $18. So that's what most of the ad platforms bill off of.
And the extra confusing layer of this specific term is not only does that M stand for thousand, not million, but this is a payment type and a metric. So where cost per click was just a metric and pay per click was just a payment type, cost per thousand, CPM, kind of both, just to make things really confusing. But the way that you're going to calculate your cost per thousand is taking your overall cost, what did you pay for that ad set within a very specific period of time, and then taking that divided by your impressions divided by 1,000, a gross formula. Within that sheet that we had shared with everyone who has registered, there is a full PDF on all of these terms that we're going over, as well as the formulas. So you don't have to remember the mumbo jumbo we're saying on how to do a formula. But basically, it's taking your impressions, dividing those by 1,000, and then dividing that by your cost to really better understand not only how are we performing, meeting a group of ideally 1,000 impressions, what is your cost associated, but it also gives you an understanding of what am I paying in total and how am I performing from a payment perspective.
Next one, search engine marketing, or SEM. So this is a particular ad type, an ad placement that shows up on your search engine results page. So say you're in Google, you're looking for a coffee shop near me, and you have all of the listings that show up. They are largely text-based, and they look like native listings oftentimes. So you have headlines sometimes too, and then some different descriptions. Depending on whether it's a desktop or mobile ad that you're seeing, you may see some additional site links or some like locations that show up or phone numbers, different items that you can interact with. Now we are seeing that platforms like Google in particular are starting to add in additional elements where you may see the bank's or the business's logo show up. There may also be an image that shows up depending on what device you are looking at these on. Typically with a SEM campaign, on your search engine results page, there are up to 7 paid spaces, usually 4 at the top and 3 at the bottom of the page. Depending on what the topic and keyword is that is being searched for, sometimes only the top 4 will show up, but there can be up to 7 on a page.
And within that document that Emma had just mentioned that you guys will see, almost all of the information we're talking about today is on that document, except for the one that I'm going to talk about right now, because it's mainly just we have to cover our bases here. What Kaylin just went over is search engine marketing, SEM. SEM is incredibly and wildly different than SEO. Those are 2 completely different entities. SEO, search engine optimization, is the practice of orienting your website or your content to rank higher on the search engine result page to suit the needs of a user. So that ideally you receive more traffic. You're trying to boost your overall visibility to meet a customer's need. And algorithms understand what is someone searching and how are you the right option for them, and will most likely rank you higher. However, this is an organic tactic. There's no money behind or paid campaign budget behind SEO. This is solely your organic traffic, how your website exists as an organic entity. And overall, like Kaylin said, there's about 4 to 7-ish listings on a search engine result page, for a paid campaign. For organic, there's about 10 listings per page. So while yes, they do live within the same space, they live on that search engine result page, they have very, very different purposes. And I think the biggest thing to take away is that SEO and SEM should not, under any circumstance, be used interchangeably. They are not the same thing. So if you're looking to boost your overall online visibility, you most definitely can use and should use paid campaign tactics to build that awareness. But you also need to be building your SEO awareness and building your authoritativeness within the search engine space. So they are not one tactic that you can just lump into each other and say, yep, I'm boosting my visibility. You have to treat them as 2 very separate entities with 2 very, very separate approaches on how to boost that visibility.
Yeah, that's a great thing to call out. And I will think one of the questions that we often see come through from either existing clients or new prospects that we're looking, that we're talking with, is they asked for help with their paid SEO listings. All right. So, it could mean a couple of different things. And so to make sure that your marketing partners, whether it's an agency or your internal department, to make sure that they are able to deliver exactly what it is that you're hoping to achieve, using the right terminology is gonna be a big help.
It's a good place to start.
Absolutely. All right. So now going into the engagement rate. So this is how actively users are engaging with your content. So this may be a term that depending on where you're looking at it on the platform, it may be calculated differently. So right up there with the payment terms, it gets a little bit confusing. Some of them, social will calculate it differently than on website than, unpaid.
Yeah, so to understand how each platform, exactly like Kaylin said, every individual platform that you're running on may have a different formula, but it all falls underneath a very similar umbrella. So for social media, an engagement rate is going to be your total interactions divided by your total impressions, and then again times 100 so we can get a nice percentage. The important thing to know for social media is the total interactions bucket. That is post likes, post shares, post comments, any type of interaction with that individual post compared to how many people saw it. What were the overall impressions? How many times was that post served within the organic and or paid space? Kind of a general rule of thumb for social media engagement, while this seems very low, an ideal engagement rate for a social platform is going to be anywhere between 1% to 5%. Feels very low, but think about the overall visibility and awareness that you're able to get with social media. There's going to be a pretty intense difference in that ratio of impressions versus overall total interaction. Whereas on the website side, the website analytics, this is similarly the percentage of sessions that are considered engaged. But the way that they're considered engaged is very different than most platforms. So your engagement rate for website analytics is going to be calculated by, did a session last for more than 10 seconds? Did this session see 2 or more page views? Did a user travel around your website? Or did they trigger a conversion event, which, as I mentioned earlier, different from your campaign conversions, it's your analytics conversion. If a user did any of these things, that's going to boost your overall website related engagement rate.
And then for the paid side of things, that's really just going to be your click-through rate. So as we mentioned before, that ratio of clicks divided by overall impressions will show you how engaged users were. So then moving right along into the engagement rate or the bounce rate, this is really the opposite of your engagement rate. This is particularly from website analytics, and this is the percent of sessions that users were not engaged, meaning that they didn't last longer than 10 seconds or complete a conversion event or view at least 2 pages. So typically, if you're trying to figure out the math for your bounce rate, it's going to be a percent and it's 1 minus your engagement rate.
That 1 is really critical in there because you are subtracting from a percentage. You have to have that 1 in there to get an accurate representation of your bounce rate, but exactly like Kaylin said, they are just the opposite of each other. And there's something that I mentioned during the engagement rate section for sessions. Sessions are just a treasure to understand, and the concept of them has adjusted slightly over the past few years. However, overall, the session on your website is the period of time in which a user is interacting with your website, and that session will end after 30 minutes of inactivity. So if I go to your website and I'm typing around, I'm going to a couple pages, this is an engaged session, and then I walk away from my computer for 30 minutes, and then I come back 35 minutes later, I refresh the page, that's a second session. Even though it could be the same browser, could be the same tab, I wasn't inactive for at least 30 minutes, so my session had to restart. This is why you sometimes see multiple sessions come from the same user. No user, it's not common that a user is ready to purchase or buy or move forward within that buying journey immediately. Sometimes they need a couple more touch points. Sometimes they need a little bit more information to make the right decision. So they're going to have to come back and learn more or re-review whatever they were looking at. But overall, it's understanding how many times did someone have to come to my website in order to move forward with an action. But that 30-minute window of inactivity is really critical to understand. That's kind of seen across the board for website analytics. Sessions are usually around a 30-minute window of inactivity, which also means that if I'm on your website for 3 hours and I do not stop, and I keep poking around and I open new tabs, and maybe I'm not even on your website anymore, but I'm still using that same browser, that's holding on to my cookie information and it's caching that information. So that is still 1 session. It's a little convoluted there, a little vague on how that is working. And that's just, it's a metric that has been around, like I mentioned, but Google has really taken a spin on how they want these sessions to be calculated. So definitely pay attention to overall, how many users do you have entering your site versus how many sessions did they have? Are they coming back to do more or to move down that funnel?
Absolutely. So I know we are coming up on time. We got 3 minutes left. If anyone has any questions, anything that you would like us to touch on.
While waiting for anything to funnel through, overall, the purpose of this is truly to know these terms inside and out. And By doing that, it will really help you properly interpret not only the results of your campaign, but help you understand how can you optimize and refine your strategies in the future. Knowing not only what these terms mean, how they function, but how are they formulated? What goes into the formulas to understand the value of the metrics or the payment types or the ad types, all of these different terms that we could go over. Truly understanding them inside and out will help you have much stronger conversations internally and externally.
What features, design elements, and CMS platforms are best suited to meet the unique needs of your financial institution?
I think I'll get started on this one. I kind of thought about this and wanted to approach it in a way that as we work with clients, what are some of the things that when we present to them that they really kind of struggle with deciding on going back and forth. And kind of when that process starts, you really have to start thinking about how you want people using your site. Of course, you always want them to, you want to have conversions, but kind of at a different level, how do you want them to use your site? And so a couple examples are the patterns you use, how you arrange stuff on a page, and taking that right to kind of a product level, your accounts, something of that nature. What kind of page do you have? It's built on, it kind of follows, how do you want to talk about your products? Do you want all your products on one page? That's something we would call a multi-product page. But when you do that, that's a lot of stuff on one page. And so you have to kind of consider, if I want all of our accounts on one page, then I might not want to have too much content or info about those because then the page can become very big and tiresome. But on the other hand, if you want to have time to spend talking about your products, then you would do standalone pages where ultimately at the end of a journey, a user ends up on a page dedicated to that product. And some benefits there are now you have opportunities to include additional content on a page like that that might tie into the product, like a blog feed or resources that might apply specifically to that product. You could even consider only having a comparison chart on your site, the good old reliable comparison chart. And even with those, they serve their purpose sometimes in tandem with these other kinds of blocks and patterns. But, do you want a comparison chart that's very easy to look at, or do you want everything about all your products inside the comparison chart? And so kind of moving on from that, another kind of feature and element to think about is your navigation. Not just your nav there at the top of your site, but your drop-down menus. There's so many ways we can approach those these days, and there's good ways and there's bad ways, but it kind of boils down into preference. And again, thinking about how do you want people navigating your site? There's something like a mega drop down where when you open it, I kind of see your whole child parent pages, your whole category pages laid out. That can be nice. That's the quickest route to get somebody to a specific product page. There it is, but they got to spend time in that menu, looking at it, and that's kind of where they're doing their exploring. Or do you want to do a more simple menu where you just list out the highest level stuff, and then a user starts going through your site, and at that point you design those pages and you use patterns to get them where they need to go, but you're getting more opportunity to inform. And then one other feature I kind of wanted to touch on that could be nice to think about is a home branch in your navigation. And what essentially that is a user being able to set a location as their home branch. And this can be beneficial for kind of a lot of features. If you have rates on your site, this can be great, especially if you have rates of change in different areas. A user can set a home branch, they get all the rates just for them without having to do any extra steps. And this kind of even rolls into some personalization, but I think Matt would be much better equipped to speak about that than me.
Yeah, sure. And generally, a rule of thumb for features on your website is that a feature should always meet a need of a customer. So that's what you should think of first when you're looking at features of your website. Make sure that they're meeting the needs of your customer. There are definitely some base needs that all customers have: security, compliance, ADA compliance, things like that. Really, those should be top notch for all websites. Ease of use. But then there's definitely some specific to each financial institution. Like Andrew said, personalization. Most FIs have very diverse demographics, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different areas that they serve. Personalization is a great way to target different groups and different cultures in different places when you have those very distinct demographics. So that's definitely a feature to look at when you're not just serving really a very typical demographic. Most FIs are going to have 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 90-year-olds, They're going to have people in rural communities and urban communities. So personalization is a great way to address that. Also things like using smart searches. So things that are more like ChatGPT or Google now when you search that answer direct questions. So this is great when you have a lot of information on your site, when you notice that your customer support center is answering a lot of questions, when you're doing conversions, things like that, where customers are really looking for information. A smart search can really take all the information on your site and allow the customer to ask a direct question and group the answer and answer the question directly on your site. So that's another feature that works well for FIs that really have a lot of information and need to answer a lot of questions. But you should also look at things like integration. So if you have a CRM or different automation tools or core banking system, making sure that the site that you build is going to integrate well into those and really support those well.
Awesome. Thank you both. And I think that's a good segue into the next question, which is how can you ensure that your CMS investment is aligned with your goals? So considering things like prioritizing capabilities over the platform prestige.
Yeah, no, this is an important one. So CMSs really can be divided into a few different groups. So your basic CMS, I would say, is the group that has WordPress in it, has Drupal, has Umbraco, really those more open source ones, great for building a website, great for doing a lot of simple marketing, things like that. And then the other group that you have are the more digital enterprise systems, ones like Sitefinity and Kentico, and even if you go beyond that, like Sitecore or some of those larger ones, or Adobe. So really, you're going to pay a premium for those things in those more advanced systems. So the first thing you want to do is really define what your needs are. It's easy to get, in our industry, we call it shiny object syndrome, where you see these features of these very robust systems. They are great features. A lot of people don't use them, and you're going to be spending a lot of money on features that you don't use. So really the first thing you should do is really have a great idea of your needs and what you're looking to do in the next few years. It's called a needs assessment. So that's evaluating your internal capabilities, what you have for staff that's able to do these things, the integrations that you might have to support, and your must-haves over your nice-to-haves. That's really the first thing. And then you should look at total cost of ownership too. So if you're budget conscious, there's going to be budget concerns with all these different platforms. Some take more to develop on, some have more maintenance down the road, some have a license fee and upfront costs. So it's really important to really look at all those factors when you're deciding something that's cheap today might be more expensive down the road, or vice versa. So that's one great thing to look at as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very important decision, and there's definitely a lot to consider. Moving along, what role does your website play in promoting brand presence and driving user conversions through the sales funnel?
I believe the brand presence has a lot to do with that. Anyone who is on this webinar has probably heard in this industry, if you've been in it long enough of any kind, your brand is not just your logo, it's not your color, anything of that. I mean, really, your brand is, what do people think about you? What do they remember about you? What was the experience they had when they were in your lobby? And on a website, you don't necessarily have that human interaction face to face that you can kind of get. And so I really like to talk to our clients about thinking about your site in some ways over what makes you bigger and better, or what makes you better than the bigger FIs like Bank of America. I'm going to pick on them because I have a bad history with them, and I hope no one from Bank of America is on here. But when you kind of look at those big ones, you have to find your niche to promote your brand, because that is how you're going to be able to stand out against some of them. Because at the end of the day, your competitors, Bank of America, you all have checking accounts at the end of the day. And so some things that I like to discuss with clients to really reinforce your brand is like resources and education. And you can find that on most FI sites, but that's something you can prioritize at your level. It can be more like a seed that you plant, depending on where you put it on your site, wherever you have content that leans into that. Again, putting them on product pages. Once I've looked at the product, here's some blocks that give me resources to learn more about that, or link in with some blogs to educate myself some more on that. Showing that you're investing in that, whether that's through your time or a partner like Bonsai, but showing that you've invested in that means you're being more than just a destination to come and open an account. You're trying to be a resource for those people. Maybe the easiest thing is testimonials. They're great. I would think that most of us would agree that when we look at anything, when we're on Amazon and we're looking at a product, we always check out the testimonials. We don't know these people. Maybe they were made by bots, but we still put a lot of weight in testimonials. And so, not being afraid of those, sometimes you might be concerned that I need to have really great ones, or I need to have an image of the person. But there's lots of ways around that, whether you have images of people or not. Just using those strategically throughout your site can always kind of show that you're providing a great service and you want to put that front and center because here's what people are saying. I think next to testimonials, the biggest and easiest thing is focus on community. That's, I think, the biggest advantage that you have as a medium-sized, smaller-sized FI is what you do in the community. I know personally that's what I looked at when I switched banks from the aforementioned evil Bank of America. Was I would notice I kind of liked knowing a little bit more where my money was going. What was it doing? What are you doing in the community? And nothing gets more personal than that. Nothing reinforces your brand more than how you interact in the community and having that content on your site for the users who want to dig into it. One little thing you can even think about, photography. Stock photography is a great resource. We're glad it's there. It fills in a lot of needs. But anytime you find yourself putting photography on your site, you know, photography tells a story without words. And so when you have custom photography, pictures you've taken at your own events, things like that, that can really help kind of funnel into that as well of just reinforcing, what kind of place you are. And then I kind of wanted to wrap up this whole thought of like all those things I mentioned. Something I really like to talk about too is putting it on your homepage. There's a whole other webinar about your homepage we could do, and a lot of the thought and patterns that go into that. But any of those things I mentioned, having that on your homepage can be a really great way to start establishing your brand because the people going down your homepage are new people for the first time. And so they will dig into your site to learn about your checking account when they're ready. But if it's on your homepage, talking about who you are through all these things can be a really good benefit to start introducing yourself and your brand right out the door.
Yeah, and we even did some research, a couple of banks, and found that for the ones we researched, 700% more new customers went to the website than all their branches combined. So definitely that's where that's the first point of contact for your brand for most people out there. That's the first impression that they're gonna get. And even talking about the funnel, that's where data comes in. You can't have a funnel without data. So very important to be able to track all that, to be able to track that the updates that you're making, the community stuff you're adding is actually paying dividends and you're moving people along that funnel. So it's great to have that. We know from experience and from data that we have that works well, especially for new customers, having that kind of content. But to be able to prove that and to be able to show that the work you're putting into it actually does move people down the funnel as well.
Absolutely, all really great points. I guess the last question that we'll leave you with is, could you guys speak to maybe some key takeaways or some points that you've mentioned today that you'd like to reiterate again for the audience?
Yeah, I can go first. I think my key takeaway from this, maybe a couple, put your money in the right spot, plan for your biggest needs of your customers, avoid shiny object syndrome, especially when looking at a CMS or a website. Make sure it's addressing your highest needs, and get help from trusted resources. If you don't know your biggest needs or you worried about missing some things, definitely Pannos will help. I know there's a lot of resources out there for help with that to really get a good idea of what you need before you start this process.
The thing I would want to add is a line a colleague of mine always used, and I think it's a very strong point to keep in mind is always remember when you're going through a new website that it is for members and users. It's not really for you and your organization. And what we just mean by that is you can kind of fall into a trap of laying out things, how it might make sense to you in the industry, or using words that make sense to you. But always kind of try and keep in mind, try to think about a site when you're making it, like if I didn't know anything about this world, accounts or mortgages, anything of that, how would I want this information presented to me?
Absolutely. So, well, thanks again, you guys. One thing that I'll add that Matt had kind of mentioned earlier is just that, we really like to say that your website really is your busiest branch. And oftentimes you do just get one opportunity if someone is in the market looking for a new bank or a new credit union. And if that experience is negative, then, automatically they're going to sort of count you out. So really think about what your strategic goals are, when you're thinking about redoing your website, and just kind of make sure that you do your due diligence and put in the same care and expertise that you might, when you're building one of your physical branches.
So this is really a key topic going forward. So many banks, credit unions, any financial institution, when going through a core conversion, whether it's for a core processor change that you're doing, or you're acquiring another institution, or you're being acquired, whatever it might be, oftentimes there's going to be a need to do a core conversion. And what we want to do is kind of take the mystery out of it and take the nerves out of it and let you know that it can be done smoothly and actually be a positive within your organization. As long as you follow some of the key issues, such as continual early and often communication, make it a positive, and ensure that whatever communications you do reflect your brand. That's really important because your brand is basically your superpower. So you want to make sure everything reflects that as well. But guys, why don't you jump in here and really start, talk a little bit about some of the key points.
All right. Well, it kind of depends on what kind of conversion you're looking at. If it's going to be an acquisition where you're bringing in another institution to be underneath you and so you have to bring their customers up to speed, or if you're just updating your own core and what goes for that. A lot of it has similar communications and pieces, but how you approach it is going to be separate. If you're looking at an acquisition, and I know Jay just did a huge one recently, where you're kind of letting these people know, not only are you updating them to the new core system, but all the new products and services that are going to be switching over from where they were with institution A to what they're going to be now with institution B, and making sure you're kind of letting all the groundwork on that. That's key. I think making sure they're comfortable and that everything makes sense to them, is understandable. Because you're going to have tons of people asking questions, but the main goal, I think, for all these communications is to try to give your customers the answers they need at their fingertips. Yep. Whether or not it's going to be mailed pieces or digital as well.
Yeah, and I think that's that was a big consideration that we had. Is the institution I was working with was bringing in a smaller bank that was kind of going under their umbrella, and they wanted to make sure they were going to be able to offer their new customers a significant amount of new products and services, improved digital access, all these kind of things. So it was a benefit. It was a bonus to these customers, and that was the main message that we wanted to do. In addition, they wanted to make sure that they could, because this was coming from a slightly smaller institution, they were concerned about how they were going to communicate it. Is email going to be as effective? How many customers were actually using email broadcast? So all those kind of things. So we had to really take a very holistic look at the entire process and make sure that we were addressing knowing their customer base as effectively as they do, best way to communicate that. And as Jim had said, frequently and as early as possible, because people are going to read an email in one ear out the other. They're going to get a piece in the mail. They're going to take a quick glance at it and move on to the bill they have to deal with. So it was really making sure you had enough touch points and that those touch points were accurately and thoroughly planned out leading up to the entire conversion process, leading up to that weekend where everything switched over.
Play off what you said as well, actually, about knowing your customer base, knowing how many of your customers do you have their emails for. You'd be surprised at how many institutions don't have, over 50%.
Yeah.
And so maybe you start off by an early letter requesting someone to log in, set up online banking so that you're getting their email system if they haven't already. Like this little steps like that at the very beginning, you're laying the groundwork. They know something's coming down the pike, and you're giving them an ask. You're letting them know we're going to do a lot of communication, and email is great, and digital in general. Because if they have online banking, when they go to log in, you can have like a little piece right there that just kind of reminds them of the upcoming conversion. Simple link right there. Go to like a microsite that you lay out all the changes, the dates, what's going on for consumer, what's going on for business, FAQ page. If you have more in depth where you're going to have you know, we've done a few where we've actually had enough videos from the new core site conversion process where it had videos of how to set yourself up to log into that new system. That's not often, but you know, we had a couple times where we had our own page where it was like a, you know, here's a library of informational videos to watch.
Yeah.
I think, and Ryan touched on something that I think is really important, because oftentimes people just, I will just toss a page on our website. Well, you toss a page on your website, it's just going to be out there, and you have to obviously drive them to that and hope it's going to be there. But oftentimes by doing a microsite, or depending on the complexity of it, if it's not all that complex, you could maybe do a landing page or a 2-page landing page, which is basically what a microsite is. But to be able to have that information on, not just with the video, if you're going to be changing products, or if you have a large conversion booklet, there's a lot of things changing. You want to be able to take that booklet and perhaps put a flip page booklet on your microsite so people can read it there. Because oftentimes they're going to get something in the mail, they're going to be inundated, they're going to see this big booklet, they're going to say, I don't need to read a 28-page booklet. Oh my God. And so the key here is to make it as easy as possible for your customer base. And if you're acquiring an organization, the new organization's customer base, because a bumpy conversion during an acquisition could lead to loss of clients in them going to other banks or credit unions because they don't want to deal with it. And your bank or credit union has just purchased, or that bank paid an awful lot of money for it. You don't want to start losing customers before you even get them into your new system. So it's really important that communication, that early and often communication, is so critical. And having that a place for them to go where they can get all the information at their fingertips is really, really great. Because again, a landing page is great, or a microsite, because somebody can look at it on their phones, on their laptops, on their iPads. You know, they don't have to go around and, you know, try to find, you know, a piece of mail that may have come in, which you're going to do anyways. But getting that out there is really going to help on the communications.
And having touch points wherever they're going to be. If they're on mobile, make sure your mobile app has a reminder. It's a little ad right there. It talks about it, links to the microsite pages. And separating the content up, I think we found works really well, so that if you're a business customer, you don't have to scroll through endless amount of personal information before you get to what is really going to change you and what you need to do. And same thing, reversely, if you're, you know, for your personal customer, you don't want to have to scroll through all the business stuff. So we find separating it into two houses, so to speak, you know, for personal and business works really well. And also, like for the booklet and all material in general, you want it to be inviting. You don't want it just to be here's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of nothing but copy. People, like Jim said, you know, look at it and you have to put it down. You want it to be inviting. You want someone to go, oh, what's this? And, you know, engage them. You want them to kind of want to keep on reading. You don't want to just have paragraph after paragraph of content. You want to be able to break it up so it's easier to do.
Yeah, take a little time to design it.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you're introducing your brand to a large number of new customers, and you want to be able to make sure that your messaging is on point, that you're making them comfortable with something that could be a little bit alarming when they first start out. You're putting them at ease. You're making sure that they're aware that this is something that's, you know, ultimately going to be in their best interest. It's going to serve them better, give them access to better products and services, you know, and it's a win-win. But do that in a way that's going to make sure that it's going to tie in with any other points of communication that you're doing. Is your branch staff appraised of what's going on? You know, do you have a call center that people may be checking in on a regular basis? You know, they may get these things and get nervous, and you may have a number of customers that are of a certain demographic that they want to go in and speak to somebody, or they want to call and get some information. Make sure that your team is well appraised, that they have access to the information that they would need, and be prepared to field any kind of questions. And again, put those customers at ease.
And it's not just when there's an acquisition.
Yeah.
When you're changing your core system to a different processor, you know, going from Fiserv to Jack Henry or whatever it might be, that's going to be a change for your existing customers or members. You've got to make sure that they are comfortable there. It's not just about losing customers that you may have acquired through an acquisition. It's also losing existing customers who see all of this, get scared by it, aren't sure what's going on, and all of a sudden start looking around for another another financial institution. So you want to make sure that, again, as we've said, you want to get out there early, often, and always have the customer in mind when you're doing it. Now, again, we've done, a ton of these. I don't mean to, and this is just letting you know, Ryan is just about ready to finish one down, I think, in Virginia, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it happened over the weekend.
Yeah. And Jay, you just finished a large one in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Right? And so all of them are different. They all have a different flavor.
Yes.
We did the one in Minnesota involved 4 different banks or something, didn't it? Is that?
Yeah, there were multiple banks.
Yeah, there are
kind of
multiple
within
banks that are
umbrella.
changing to the same core processor. So there's all sorts of ones that are out there that can be handled and can be communicated in the best way possible. So, and I know one thing we haven't touched on, and we will, and I'm going to just mention it now so that we don't forget, and that's the regulatory hurdles that will be coming up. You need to make sure that what you're doing not only is communicating to your customers, your acquired customers and/or members, but it's also compliant with the rules and regulations of the government to make sure that you are doing the right job communicating with your existing customers who are being affected.
Regulation DD, that's the main one that you want to focus on. That's 30 days out. So what we always try to do is focus, is make sure, and for this is the big piece. This is the big piece. This is for us. Usually it's the actual booklet where you're spelling every change out, every step the customer needs to do, every date, every hurdle that could be in their way. They're getting this booklet 30 days plus from the date of conversion. That way they can plan accordingly. You're stressing them, hey, our ATMs are going to be down, so you might want to, have some cash ready for this weekend. You can go to other ATMs and you can get some minimum cash out. I think each one's a little different.
And you can refund foreign ATM fees, for instance, for that weekend.
But you're not going to be able to access your actual account information, so you won't know, oh, how much do I have left? You're not going to be able to see that during weekend conversions.
Yeah, is online banking going to be down?
Yeah.
Same kind of stuff.
You need to make sure you're stressing to these customers what, when, and where.
Yeah.
And I think that booklet is the main thing that we always, that's for us what we use as the main piece. Because this way they have every piece of information they have at their fingertips, 30 days out at minimum. And then after that, we do a lot of follow-ups of communications. Like, don't forget this weekend.
Mhm.
If there is a step that they need to take, I've had a couple where they need to re-register prior to the actual conversion. And so we included a link in the email. Don't forget to re-register here. And we link
For
out.
online banking.
Yeah,
or
for
whatever.
online
Yeah.
banking. And we'll
Yeah.
include that link as well in the microsite so that no matter where you are, you have access to that information on the phone.
And don't forget, the first mailer, which we usually send out months in advance, save the date, whatever it might be, that can go out standard rate post.
Yeah.
That could be a postcard or something with a little information in it. And then make sure your branch is aware of what's going on. But what Ryan's talking about, that booklet, that however many page booklet, we've had them up to 48 pages, has to go out first class. And you can't mess around with this because you try to send it out and save some postage because you could be sending out 10, 15, 20,000 pieces. And it's going to cost a little bit more money to send it out first class. But the way the post office now is with standard rate postage, you're not sure when that's going to arrive. Even if you give it a week in advance before that 30-day notice, that could show up 29 or 28 days prior to the conversion because it's standard rate, in which case you'd be in violation and you could get dinged by the regulators. So please always focus on getting first class postage when you're doing that second mailer, the one that has
That
the booklet.
And then if you also, we've also done where it's 2 booklets where it's a fee. All the fees schedules are changing, and that in itself could be a separate booklet.
Yeah, and we've done booklets that are both, there's one for commercial lending, commercial banking, and one for the retail group. So, it depends on your bank. When we do them, we customize them any way you need. And again, going back to what Ryan was saying, make sure it's inviting, do a little design with it, and give it your brand. And that to me is a key piece because people will feel more comfortable knowing it's coming from you.
Yes. Yeah, definitely want people to don't think that this is a scam. Or anything
Yeah,
like
right.
that,
Yeah.
so.
And I think too, it's also important just to kind of remember, we're talking kind of very large picture, significant changes. There are sometimes maybe your core provider, you're staying with your same core provider, but you're doing an upgrade. Maybe it's a product upgrade within the same core provider. So maybe the changes for your customers aren't that significant, relatively speaking. Their account will be changing, their account number will be the same, all that kind of stuff. It's still important to communicate this stuff because you need to make them aware, because if there's any kind of hiccup or anything like that, giving them that awareness ahead of time makes you look like you are in control, you know what's going on, you've given them the information that they need, you're being proactive in that case. So, whether it's a significant change or even something that would be considered minor, it's really the same level of importance to make sure that you're making those communications as often, as frequently as possible.
100%. Email, postcard, letters, everything you could possibly do. Especially email is great, especially if your base is stronger than the digital. Because that's the easiest way to get something out to your customer base. You don't have to worry about shipping. It's hitting right when you can't tell it hit.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about any kind of postage. You don't have to worry about printing. It's great. It's so much easier that way. And it also helps to do a good follow-up with this as well after the conversion weekend. Give it a week just to make sure that everyone's logging back in. Has there been any hiccup? What's going on that end? And that way you address those issues. Again, you want them to feel comfortable. You don't want your customers to feel like you didn't know what was going on. Like, oh yeah, we knew this went out. That's why you're getting this right now.
And you're also providing them with follow-up contact points too. It's like, if you are still experiencing any issues or something like that, stop by one of your local branches, call our call center, speak to, somebody within the branch, that kind of stuff. You're making sure that they feel that they're being heard and can get any issues that they have that are going to be addressed by the bank staff.
I think for me, as working here in Pannos, the earlier we can start on this conversation, the better. Like I said, we just finished a great one where we almost started working on this about 11 months ago. And it was great. There was no stress. The team at the institution they knew what they were doing, even though they've never done one before. They were on top of all the questions that we have for them.
They actually listened to us.
They listened. It was great. It was awesome. We had no problems with getting, we weren't waiting till the last minute, like, this needs to go to the printer today at 5, and it's 4:55. You're still waiting on, something from, a new product name or something. It's great. I can't stress that enough. Start early, as early as you possibly can, to have a conversation with your team as well.
And what they did, if I'm not mistaken, they sent out a mailer last year, and here we are in July. It was prior to the holidays to try to get email addresses from their customers who they don't have, to build up that inventory of email addresses so that when the conversion is starting to roll, we have them to send out on their behalf to their customer base. So again, start early. I can't stress that enough. If your conversion is happening in October, it's too late. Start now, okay? Get off this call and start. But seriously, if you're looking forward, you've got a date, take a step back about 6 to 8 months beyond and just start organizing it. Again, in the direct mail Ryan was talking about, usually there's 2, right? There's the postcard, which is save the date, 4 to 6 months.
I think we've done, we've done like 3 or we've done up to 4.
Yeah.
But I think typically we do at least a minimum of 2, where we try to have, like you said, the save the date / coming soon message that's in a postcard, and then we have the big mailing piece.
And then you can even follow up that one
with a reminder
postcard 2 weeks out. Say it's like, all right, don't forget. This is coming. Reach out to us for questions. If you have any concerns, visit this microsite. Any of those kind of things. It's just, I mean, with the amount of information that people are being hit with every day, it doesn't hurt to just kind of stay on top of it.
Right. And get signage out in your branches.
Yes.
Okay. 22 by 28, 1114 easel back, whatever it is. Get it in your drive-through. Put signs at your ATM or
Digital screens.
Whatever it might be. Get the information out there. And so again, can't stress that the more your customers know, the smoother the process will go. I like that rhyme.
That's nice.
All right. Emma, could you write that down? Okay.
I love that.
So I think it's a process. And one thing I want to just offer to the group here, whether you're in person listening to us or it's those people who may receive the recording, or everybody's going to receive it, but is if you have questions, if you're going through one, don't be afraid to give us a call to talk to us. We're not gonna charge you. We're not gonna start the clock running, any of that stuff. Again, I'm a former banker. I was in banking for a number of years. I've done a couple of conversions. I know how important it was to be able to find people who have done these before to help me go through them. So if you have any questions, just reach out to the agency. We have a contact form on our website. Emma usually gets those. She'll forward it to whoever she thinks is right. We'll get back to you and we'll answer any questions you need without worry about any obligation or anything like that. Of course, if you want us to help you, we will, but I'm not saying we will help you in any way we can, because we feel that strongly about working with, because all we do is work with banks and credit unions. So I feel real strongly to make sure those conversions go smoothly and nobody gets dinged, whether it's, again, a change of core, upgrade of core, or an acquisition.